Writing. The last thing I remembered from the company party was my boss standing beneath the bright afternoon lights of the hotel terrace, looking at me as if she had finally found the courage to say something she had been carrying for years. Then she kissed me. Not a playful kiss, not the kind people give during a silly party game, but a quiet, trembling kiss that lasted just long enough to change everything I thought I knew about her. The next morning, I walked into the office expecting embarrassment, an awkward apology, or perhaps a cold professional distance. Instead, she closed the door behind me, looked straight into my eyes, and asked, "Do you remember what happened last night?" My stomach dropped, because the question wasn't asked with regret. It was asked with fear. My name is Rowan Mercer, and for 6 years I had worked at a growing architectural firm called Northbridge Design. I wasn't one of the people whose photographs appeared in business magazines. I wasn't the kind of employee who stayed late just to be noticed. I was simply dependable. I arrived before most people, fixed problems nobody wanted to touch, and went home at a reasonable hour to the small apartment I shared with my aging father. My life was ordinary, sometimes painfully ordinary, but I had learned to appreciate that. After my mother passed away, my father became quieter, and I discovered that stability mattered more to me than excitement ever could. My boss, Serafina Vale, was the opposite of ordinary. She was 38, brilliant, composed, and respected by everyone who worked under her. She could walk into a room full of angry clients and somehow make everyone lower their voices. People often assumed she was cold because she rarely showed emotion at work, but I had noticed the small things. She remembered which employees had children. She knew when someone's mother was ill. She once drove 2 hours to deliver medicine to an employee who had been stranded during a storm. She simply never allowed anyone to see how much she cared. For almost a year, Serafina and I had worked closely on the biggest project our firm had ever received. We spent long afternoons reviewing designs, arguing over details, and occasionally laughing when everyone else had already gone home. There was something between us, something neither of us named. I tried to ignore it because she was my boss and because I needed my job. She seemed to ignore it for the same reason. If you believe people deserve kindness, second chances, and the opportunity to be understood before they are judged, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Whispered Tales. Sometimes the person standing quietly beside us is carrying a story we know nothing about. The company anniversary party took place on a bright Saturday afternoon at a modern hotel overlooking the city. Sunlight poured through enormous glass windows, turning the polished floor into a mirror. There were white flowers on the tables, soft music in the background, and employees laughing together without the usual pressure of deadlines. For once, nobody cared about presentations or budgets. Even Serafina seemed different. She wore a simple blue dress, and her hair was loosely tied behind her shoulders. She smiled more that afternoon than I had seen her smile in an entire year. As the party continued, I noticed she kept looking at me from across the room. Whenever our eyes met, she looked away. Eventually she came over and asked if I would walk outside with her. We stepped onto the terrace where the noise became distant. The city stretched beyond us beneath a clear afternoon sky. Serafina leaned against the railing and told me that she had received an offer from another company. She had been considering leaving Northbridge for months. I was shocked, because she had built the firm almost from nothing. Then she told me something I never expected. She said she was tired of making every decision based on fear. Fear of failure. Fear of gossip. Fear of losing control. Fear of letting people know that behind the professional mask was a woman who sometimes felt lonely. I didn't know what to say. I told her that being afraid didn't make her weak. It made her human. She looked at me for several seconds, and there was such sadness in her expression that I felt something inside me break. She stepped closer. For one suspended moment, neither of us moved. Then she kissed me. The world seemed to stop. When she pulled away, her eyes filled with tears. She whispered that she was sorry, but I told her she didn't have to apologize for being honest. She touched my hand, then walked back inside before either of us could say anything else. Later that evening, I left the party early because my father called. He had been feeling unwell and wanted me home. I drove back through quiet streets, replaying the kiss in my mind. I barely slept. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, hoping I could avoid Serafina. Instead, her assistant told me she wanted to see me immediately. When I entered her office, she was standing beside the window. Sunlight filled the room, but her face looked pale. She turned around and asked whether I remembered the kiss. I told her I did. Her shoulders lowered, almost with relief. Then she said there was something I needed to know. The company had been investigating missing financial records for months. Someone had been secretly transferring money from a major project account. Serafina had discovered evidence pointing toward a senior executive who had been with the company since its earliest days. But the executive had discovered that she knew. The previous night, Serafina had intended to tell me everything because she believed I was the only person she could trust. She had wanted to warn me because the executive had begun looking into my work records after discovering that I had access to several project documents. My blood ran cold. She told me the kiss wasn't part of some reckless game. It happened because she had spent months realizing that she cared about me more deeply than she should have. But she had been terrified that admitting it would destroy both our careers. Then she showed me a folder. Inside were copies of financial reports, altered invoices, and emails. My name appeared in several documents, not because I had done anything wrong, but because someone had been preparing to make it look as though I had approved transactions I had never seen. For the first time, I understood why she had looked so frightened. The next few days were brutal. Rumors spread through the company. Someone anonymously circulated a photograph from the party showing Serafina and me standing close together on the terrace. People began whispering that I had received special treatment because of her. My promotion was questioned. My integrity was questioned. Even some colleagues I trusted stopped speaking to me. I wanted to resign. Serafina refused to let me. She told me that running away would make it easier for the people who had created the deception. So we worked together quietly, collecting evidence. Every document revealed another piece of the truth. Eventually, we discovered that the senior executive had been manipulating accounts for nearly 3 years. Several employees had unknowingly helped him by approving documents he had altered. Then came the hardest discovery. Serafina had known about the irregularities earlier than she admitted. She had been trying to investigate them alone because she feared that if she exposed the wrong person, the entire company could collapse. She apologized to me for keeping me in the dark. I told her I understood why she had been afraid. But understanding did not mean everything was suddenly easy. There was still the question of us. We both knew that even if the investigation ended successfully, our relationship could not continue while she remained my direct supervisor. She could not ask me to choose between my career and my feelings. I couldn't ask her to risk the company she had built. Weeks later, the investigation finally became public. The executive was removed, the fraudulent transactions were uncovered, and the company cleared every employee who had been falsely implicated. My name was officially cleared. Serafina resigned as chief executive. On her last day, she stood in the lobby while employees applauded. She thanked everyone, but when her eyes found mine, the entire room seemed to disappear again. Afterward, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a note saying that she had spent years believing strength meant never needing anyone. She said I had taught her that sometimes strength meant trusting someone enough to let them see your fear. She left the building that afternoon. For 3 months, we didn't speak. Then one bright Saturday morning, I received a message from her. She had started a new design studio across town. She wasn't my boss anymore. She asked if I would meet her for coffee. I arrived at the cafe with my heart pounding. She was sitting near the window, sunlight falling across the table. She looked nervous, almost like the woman I had first met years before. We talked for hours. There was no secret, no company policy, no fear of gossip between us anymore. When we walked outside, she stopped beside the sidewalk and looked at me. This time, she didn't kiss me. She simply reached for my hand. And somehow that meant more. Because the first kiss had been born from fear, uncertainty, and emotions we had both tried to hide. But that moment was different. It was a choice made freely, without a title standing between us. A year later, I joined her studio. Not because she was my boss, but because we had built something based on trust. We worked together, argued over designs, laughed over coffee, and learned that love isn't always about dramatic declarations. Sometimes it is about standing beside someone when their reputation is falling apart. Sometimes it is about believing them when everyone else doubts them. Sometimes it is simply staying when leaving would be easier. And every now and then, when someone asks how our story began, Serafina smiles and tells them it began with one dangerous question. Do you remember? I always smile back. Because I remember the kiss. But more importantly, I remember what came after it. I remember learning that people are more complicated than the roles they play. A boss can be lonely. A quiet employee can be brave. A mistake can become a beginning. And sometimes the person who changes your life isn't the one who saves you from your problems, but the one who stands beside you while you find the courage to face them. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to Whispered Tales. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before you leave, write one word in the comments: trust. I want to know how many of you still believe that trust, honesty, and kindness can change the direction of a person's life. Because sometimes, the most important moment isn't the moment someone kisses you. It's the moment they choose to stay.